Hello dear friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss on the topic mandatory injunction. Okay. Now before we get into the topic, I would like to give you a brief understanding of what injunction is. Okay. So basically injunction is a legal remedy which a court imposes. Okay. What kind of a legal remedy is it? Okay. So basically if there is a if a person is vested with a specific right, okay, and if he is finding it difficult to enforce his right, he may approach the honorable court to get the same enforced. Okay, so injunction is basically of two types, positive as well as negative. Okay, now positive injunction is otherwise known as a mandatory injunction, in that a person will be directed to do a certain task in order to facilitate the plaintiff to enforce his right. And the second one is negative injunction, which is otherwise called prohibitory injunction. Okay, in prohibitory injunction, a person is restrained from doing a particular task. Now, in simple term, what injunction means is that one of the parties to a certain action will be directed to do, which is positive, or refrain, which is negative, from doing a certain thing. Now, to give you a better understanding, there are basically 5 types of injunction. Okay, and these are described in detail in Specific Relief Act. Okay, in Specific Relief Act, section 36 and 37 talks about temporary and permanent injunction. Section 38 talks about perpetual injunction. Section 39 about mandatory injunction. Section 40 deals with damages in addition to injunction, and section 42 deals with injunction to perform negative covenants. Okay, now other than this, section 151 and section 94 of CPC deals with provision relating to injunction. Okay, now in this topic we are talking mostly about mandatory injunction, or rather we are talking only about mandatory injunction. So now mandatory injunction is considered as the most rigorous form of injunction, because in this a person is directed to do a certain task. It is a positive it is a positive act. You are directed by the court to do a specific act. Now you may ask, what is the difference between a mandatory injunction and a specific relief, a suit for specific performance? Now a suit for a specific performance is confined only to those obligations which is arising out of a contract, whereas mandatory injunction will have a much wider scope. Okay, now in mandatory injunction, the obligations may rise out of a contract or a tort. Okay, now I hope that gives you clarity on what a cause of action for a mandatory injunction is. Now what is the purpose, why mandatory injunction? Okay, now the purpose of mandatory injunction is to restore a wrongful state of thing to their former rightful order. Okay, now if there is a status quo, okay, and if a person has intervened and carried out a wrongful act, okay, in order to bring that back to its status quo, basically this mandatory injunction is ordered. Now what is the difference between prohibitory injunction and a mandatory injunction? In a prohibitory injunction, what happens is the court directs a person to not do a particular thing in a particular manner. Okay, a person is directed not to carry out or do a task in a particular do a particular thing in a particular manner, whereas in the latter, that is in mandatory injunction, what happens is the court directs a person to do a particular thing in a particular manner. Okay, and in case if the judgment debtor he's not in a position to do something, or he omits to do or rather omits to carry out the direction of the court will get it carried out through its court officers. Okay. Now, what are the essentials in order to get a mandatory injunction? That is something we'll have to look into. Now, there has to be an obligation to perform. Okay. The only if there is an obligation to perform which is promised, okay, and that is not done, okay, only when the plaintiff alleges that there was an obligation to do a particular duty and that duty was not carried out by the defendant, will a cause of action for a mandatory injunction will arise. Okay, and also in order to get the same enforced, or in order to get a order for mandatory injunction, it has to be a case wherein such a decree can be enforced. Okay, for example, if there was an obligation to carry out a task which require the skills or a skill set of a person, that cannot be enforced through a mandatory injunction, because that is something which the court cannot essentially ensure is carried out in its 100% capacity. So the enforceability of the relief is something which the court will look into while passing an order for mandatory injunction. Okay. Now let's see what are the conditions in which mandatory injunction will not be granted. Now, for that there are basically four. Okay, if the the relief which the plaintiff seeks, if the relief could be given in terms of compensation, that is in terms of money, then mandatory injunction will not be granted. Now, another scenario in which mandatory injunction will not be granted is when the balance of convenience is in favor of the defendant. That is first. The second. Now, third is when a mandatory injunction is not granted, is when the plaintiff has accepted the act of defendant. If plaintiff has accepted the act of defendant, then definitely a mandatory injunction cannot be granted. And as the last point is when the mandatory injunction is granted in order to maintain status quo. Okay, it is not for creating a new state of affairs. Okay. So basically, mandatory injunction is an effort or an attempt which is to ensure that the status quo as it is maintained. Now, next is the question as to whether a mandatory injunction can be passed ex parte. The next point is ex parte. So next question is whether the court is empowered to pass a mandatory injunction order ex parte. So order 39 rule 13 empowers the court to grant ex parte injunction order, but what has to be ensured is that the specific circumstances due to which it was necessary to pass such an order has to be enumerated in the order. Okay, failing which it will be difficult, or failing which it can be challenged. Okay, now next is execution. Now Article 135 of Limitation Act gives a period of 3 years for gives a period of 3 years for execution of a decree for mandatory injunction. Now, what are the methods in which execution can be ordered? That for that we can look at Order 21 Rule 32(1), which empowers the court to direct JD to be imprisoned or attach his properties or both, and also as per Order 21 Rule 32(5), which enables the court to direct JD to perform a particular act which is directed in the decree. So this is a small gist of what mandatory injunction is, the scope of mandatory injunction, execution of mandatory injunction, what are the conditions that has to be satisfied in order to get a decree for mandatory injunction, etc., etc. And in my next videos I will be talking about the other types of injunctions. I hope you all will look into it, and you get an understanding of the different types of injunction. Just let me know in case you need a much more detailed analysis of mandatory injunction, and so that we can learn and grow together in law. Thank you.